Welcome to Couch Quarterbacks.
Hey guys, welcome to the Couch Quarterbacks episode 7. We have a awesome episode for you today. A lot of hard work going into this one and a lot of reactionary. I would say this one's less of a predictive episode, and more of a reactionary episode as we're talking about post-draft analysis. I am Ben. With me, as always, is Andrew, and we are going to get started today talking about the latest news in the NFL, particularly the draft that just happened last week.
Yeah, of course, Stein, one of the best weeks that we've had in a long time, probably since the Super Bowl in regards with football,
Yes.
as we were able to have the NFL draft, 3 action-packed days of just college guys getting drafted into the NFL. Like you said, we're going to have the analysis, mainly of the first round, but then we'll also kind of talk about some of those late round steals, maybe some questionable picks in the later rounds, and then we'll go into more of a team aspect and talking about which teams had the best drafts, which teams maybe not so much.
Yep. But first, before we start off with the draft talk, I kind of want to get to this headline that we've been ignoring because I don't know if it's really going anywhere, and that's the Aaron Rodgers deal.
Yeah.
And we haven't brought it up in a previous show, so I just wanted to bring it up, put it out there.
Well, that's the reason why we haven't brought it up yet is because when we actually filmed our NFL draft preview, this didn't really happen, or there wasn't talks about it yet because it happened actually on draft nights.
We knew he was disgruntled though in Green Bay.
Yeah, but the big headline broken from Adam Schefter wasn't until draft night. Some people didn't like it because they thought it took away from the NFL draft and these prospects getting drafted. But yes, Aaron Rodgers says that he wants out of Green Bay. It's kind of a similar situation to Deshaun Watson when it breaks down to it. It's like Deshaun, the quarterback doesn't want to be there. The coaching staff doesn't want to get rid of him.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of at a standstill right now. It's like, well, does Rodgers retire? Does he go into his career as a Jeopardy host? Does he get traded to another team?
If he does, the teams that have been brought up have only been specifically West Coast teams, the Raiders, the Niners, the Chargers, just teams on the Broncos even, I've heard.
Yeah, I wouldn't see San Diego, or not San Diego, LA. I wouldn't see San Francisco.
Yeah, you wouldn't see them, but for some reason those guys are being brought up.
Oakland would be a possibility. They were brought up again with Russell Wilson when there were trade talks rumbling with him. Denver, once again, makes sense. They're saying it would be kind of a 2.0 of Peyton Manning, where Denver just gets these great quarterbacks on the back end of their career.
Honestly, this is such an early story, kind of like Deshaun. Like, we don't really know where it could go. We'll keep y'all posted on it, but that's just kind of like the elephant in the room that we need to get out because, we don't know. I mean, we both like Aaron Rodgers. That's the thing, we both like Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, it's looking very unlikely that he's going to stay in Green Bay. But then again, I feel like he's been kind of unhappy for the past couple years. And this is something that just one last thing. It seems like it's just been brewing up for a while. You've heard all the headlines about the Packers never drafting him any sort of first-round receiver or first-round help. Yes, he ends up getting guys like Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, but all those guys are second, third-round draft picks.
He loves the other Packers. You saw the pictures of him at the Kentucky Derby with David Bakhtiari and some of those other old Packers. So he loves his teammates. I don't think he's like a bad teammate at all. I just think it's the main problem is him and versus the GM and the front office.
Yeah,
I don't think LaFleur's even. I don't think it's him versus LaFleur.
That's what the big headline is, that he wants the GM fired. That's the biggest thing. Yeah, I don't think it's as much with LaFleur. I think it's more with that front office, the GM. I don't know, maybe some of the other front office personnel.
The Packers, we know, are very interesting of a team. Because they're publicly owned. They're not the Cowboys. Jerry Jones is going to sit down with Aaron and be like, "Listen now, Aaron, we need you to play for us." No, there's no
It's
public.
Pretty good Jerry Jones impression.
Thank you. I've been working on it. There's not like someone that he can really talk to with ownership for the Packers. So we'll keep you all posted, but let's get back into what we came here for today.
Yeah, so we'll start off. We're going to get to just a round one recap, kind of talking about some of the high points, especially from the first round of the draft, because that's what mostly everyone cares about, is that opening night. Yeah. And then we'll kind of get into some questionable picks, some great picks, And then, like I also mentioned, we'll get into more of a team focus, talking about which teams had a good draft, which teams had a bad draft.
We're not going to give y'all a full grade for every draft because we've seen all the grades, and I mean a lot of them just range from you can never grade a draft. It's impossible to grade a draft.
I mean,
accurately.
Yeah, you kind of have to look at it. 5 years from now is really where I'd say you can kind of evaluate
we
a draft.
can talk about how bad certain classes are, but that's in hindsight. We can't say this draft class. With the one thing we can say about this draft class, it was offensive heavy early, and that's evident because the first defender was taken number 8,
J.C. Horn to Carolina,
which we'll talk about. But let's talk about the first 2 picks, which everyone knew going off the bat. First one, Trevor to Jacksonville, T-Law to Jacksonville, combining with Urban Meyer. Makes sense. Best quarterback prospect since Luck, that's what they're saying. Big guy, big hands, good football IQ, good family, good overall guy. I mean, it just makes sense. I don't know if you saw the pictures they released of him in the Jaguars jersey, wearing number 16, already looking good in the teal. I think I predicting him success. I don't think he's going to be, a Joe Montana. I don't think he's going to be a Tom Brady, but I think he's going to be I think he's going to be a decent quarterback.
Yeah, it's definitely going to take some time in Jacksonville. We know they're a one-loss team from last season, a rebuilding team. So it's going to take them a little bit to kind of turn that team around. But Trevor should have a very successful career, barring any sort of injury, which we're not hoping for, obviously.
I mean, Urban Meyer, I don't think is the right hire, and I think we might see that in 2 or 3 years that they realize that.
I don't think he'll be there for longer than maybe 3 seasons.
Yeah,
and even that could be pushing it.
Honestly, I'm gonna jump on that train too. I really don't think that Urban is gonna be the long-term answer there. But the Jacksonville had a lot of picks. They really kind of trying to revamp their team and get the fans excited for. And with the Texans being so bad, Jacksonville, I don't think will be the worst team in the AFC South. Let's be honest.
Second worst is better than worst.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but the Trevor going number 1, he's at least going to put fans in the stands as long as COVID allows it. Put asses in the seats. The Lawrence jerseys, like you were talking about,
probably
will
already be top 10 right now in NFL jersey sales. Number 2, another not surprise, was Zach Wilson getting roasted on draft night, wearing
putting out that Twitter
those
post.
Tweets. Yeah, Zach Wilson is probably the most popular bust pick, and I think that might be a dual purpose because 1, he's going to the Jets.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like 1, just from his skill set, and then 2, I think the reason why a lot of people are picking him to be a bust is just because him going to the Jets, where it just seems like guys' careers go to die.
And that's the hill I'm going to die on myself, is the fact that I think he's going to be the biggest bust of this draft. And you guys can mark that on May 8th or 7th, whatever today is. Do you know what today is?
May 7th.
May 7th. I'm trying to think of May the 4th because that was Star Wars Day. I'm trying to do the math in my head, but it's hard. Today is May 7th. You guys can mark that down at 2:01 p.m. that I think Zach Wilson will be the biggest bust of this draft, probably the biggest bust in the past 3 years in terms of quarterback. Because he really shot up draft boards. Justin Fields was the number 2 guy since he came into college.
Yeah, it was
going to be Lawrence and Fields 1 and 2.
There's a tweet that came out on draft night where it's talking about how, because remember the Big Ten wasn't even going to have their season. So they were saying how Justin Fields, if he didn't play at all this season, stayed opted out, he would have been the number 2 quarterback off the board. But with him trying to vie for the Big Ten to have their season, he ends up playing, goes to a national championship game, has a great season for Ohio State, and he gets rewarded with being the 4th quarterback off the board. So it's just crazy how him actually playing hurt his value. We talk about all these guys opting out and the big question marks on the tape, and just they haven't seen live action in a while. Well, Justin Fields actually playing hurt his value, and Zach Wilson ends up jumping him to the number 2nd ranked quarterback, and then the kind of lock pick for the Jets at 2nd overall.
Yeah, so I like Saleh. I hope he can do well in New York, but I think they're just a snake-bitten franchise overall and really didn't help their offense by much. I mean, who's their running backs right now?
They drafted Michael Carter, one of the
but-
two running backs out of North Carolina.
Yeah.
They got Elijah Moore, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss. So they're once again. There's a reason why these teams are 1 and 2 in the draft. There's going to be a lot of turnaround for them. They got new coaching staff, so it's going to be a couple years until we see kind of results on the field from them. But yeah, Zach Wilson is, I think, a favorite pick for the biggest bust from this draft.
Speaking of bust, another popular bust pick is the 49ers trading up. We talked about that last week.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone penciled Mac Jones as probably their guy. There was even talks of the 49ers camp saying that Mac Jones was their guy. But they actually take Trey Lance at 3, 20 years old, played one game
raw.
last year. I think I read a stat that said he has the second least amount of college throws for a top 10 quarterback or something like that.
Yeah, so that's what Mac Jones, when the 49ers first made that trade, was the very heavy favorite to go number 3 overall to the 49ers. They said Shanahan loves him, and it seemed like that was going to be a done deal. Just kind of as all the draft stuff got closer and closer, you kind of started to see the tides turn a little bit. They really liked what Trey Lance did at the couple of pro days that they had for him. We talked about the second pro day where it seemed like the 49ers were pretty much running a private practice in terms of what they wanted Lance to do.
Yeah.
And then it was very early in the afternoon on draft day when Trey Lance actually became the odds-on favorite to go number 3 overall. And then I still wasn't sold on it. I was sticking with Mac Jones. And then number 3 overall, I think most people were surprised when Trey Lance's name was called instead of Mac Jones.
Yeah, they say that, that the real draft started at pick 3. And, they had a choice of Mac or Lance because we knew they were going quarterback. Now, some people are saying that he doesn't have to start right away, which makes sense. Jimmy Garoppolo is still, as of now, a 49er.
Mm-hmm.
That could change. We could see him have to step up. But we know right now that the Niners are still a run-first offense. And until anything, until we see this guy's arm in an NFL caliber, against NFL caliber defenses, we won't know how that offense will change. I think they're going to stick with the run. I think they'll stick with Jimmy Garoppolo if he is a Niner. And then if maybe in a year or two, I think we could see Lance take over the starting job.
Yeah, and one of the biggest reasons why I was saying Mac Jones over Trey Lance was just because I mentioned it in our last show that even though the 49ers were 6-10, they had all those injuries last season. So I thought that the best way for them to compete right now and to kind of try and get into the playoffs and compete for another Super Bowl, I thought the easiest way for them to do that was to have Mac Jones at quarterback, because everyone is saying that he's like the most pro-ready quarterback right now.
I mean, I think he's really comparable to Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
Honestly, in terms of his ability, he's not a runner. He's a great passer. But the main knock on Mac, and we'll talk about it when we get to the Patriots. Spoiler alert: he went to the Patriots. is the fact that he had this kind of 1-year wonder and all those weapons around him. I mean, Alabama in the past 2 years, 4 starting NFL caliber receivers. Maybe.
I mean, you saw 2 of them in this draft.
Yeah, 2 of them in this draft. 2 of them, Henry Ruggs and Judy last year, and this year Waddle and Smith. So.
Yeah, so that could definitely be a knock on Mac Jones. One of the things that the 49ers really do love about Trey Lance is just and we talked about it with his analysis pre-draft, is just that he is a grinder in the film room. He just does a good job of watching
really
tape.
Good football IQ.
Great preparation, great football IQ. So that's something that they can match up with Kyle Shanahan, another great offensive mind
for someone
in the game.
Someone who is 20 to have those kind of accolades is great, and I'm sure the leadership will have to come, and the maturity. I mean, I'm not saying he's immature, but as 20 years old, you know, you're gonna be paying millions of dollars. You're gonna be in a fun city. You might be a little immature. Just saying. We're gonna skip the Falcons because they were at 4, and
they ended up going with Kyle Pitts, the guy that everyone expected. We'll talk about the Falcons draft as a whole at the very end of the show. We'll move on to the number 5 pick, which was another somewhat surprise. A lot of mock drafts had the Bengals actually going with this guy. Yeah. We both thought that they should go in a different direction. with getting the offensive line help for Joe Burrow after the injury from last season. But the Bengals end up reuniting Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and they take Chase, the wide receiver, out of LSU at 5.
I mean, Bengals receiving core right now, you have Jamar Chase, you got Tyler Boyd, and then you got the guy T. Higgins, whose name I always forget. I always want to say Amari Rodgers, but I know that's another.
He went to Green Bay in this draft.
So you have a pretty deep receiving core. Even after losing A.J. Green, you got Joe Mixon coming back. But the thing is, Joe still needs help protecting, his knee. You saw everyone seen the picture of his knee scar on social media, and Sewell, a guy who was getting comparisons to Anthony Munoz, a former Bengal. I mean, that just seemed like a match made in heaven. Granted, I do like Jamar going back, being reunited with his quarterback. I mean, that's just... It's just like another kind of match. If they could have had both guys, that would have been...
Yeah, that's what... I put this down as a questionable pick just because they passed on Sewell, something that I thought was a bigger need. And like I said, especially just in kind of the recency bias of seeing Joe's injury last season, passing on the offensive lineman. That's not saying that Jamar Chase is not going to have a great career. Like you were saying, I think it's great that they were able to reunite Burrow and Jamar Chase.
I mean, Chase has also been a top 5 pick in fantasy drafts for keepers. Yeah. And I'm sure he'll be, a later pick. But he'll definitely be an opening, I would say an opening week starter for fantasy.
Yeah, I try and shy away in fantasy from
definitely a flex guy, but I would say he would be a good start.
One of the comparisons that I gave was like Justin Jefferson, another LSU receiver. You saw he really didn't burst onto the scene until like week 4, week 5 fantasy wise, and becoming one of those top targets. So I always kind of pump the brakes in terms of some of those high draft picks for the offensive guys when it comes to fantasy purposes. But like I said, Jamar Chase still a good pick for the Bengals. I just thought it was a little questioning why they passed on Penei Sewell, and Sewell ends up dropping to number 7 to the Lions, which I thought was a great pick for them to not have to move up to grab one of the best offensive linemen in recent history.
I mean, the Lions were going to go with best available.
Yeah.
We knew that. They needed receiving help, but you can't just pass up a guy who's getting comparisons to NFL Hall of Famers in Sewell. The Bengals did address their O-line with their second pick, taking Jackson Carman from Clemson. Not really a guy whose name kind of stuck out. I guess they're just kind of looking to fill the niche that they needed. But hopefully Joe can be protected. I think another year. I mean, Jonah Williams is a good offensive lineman. I think they signed somebody else too. I forgot.
I think it'll still be a big need for the Bengals, as they should have a decently high pick, should be back in the top 10 next season. So hopefully they'll be able to address another offensive lineman.
I mean, if they can just throw quick slants to Jamar Chase, then Joe doesn't have to hold the ball that long.
There you go, quicker out of his hands, then he can't get hurt. But,
yes.
Moving on to the first defender off the board, like Stein mentioned earlier, we had J.C. Horn to Carolina at number 8. So
from South Carolina.
Yeah, so we thought that they might go quarterback here with Sam Darnold being the only guy on the roster. Well, I don't know if he's the only guy on the roster, but
the only viable starter.
Exactly. They traded away Teddy Bridgewater for like a 6th-round pick to Denver. So we thought that maybe
I think they still have the guy from West Virginia, Greer. Will Greer.
Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah.
But they end up going with the cornerback instead of the quarterback. And the more surprising part about them not going defense, but passing on Patrick Surtain, not going Micah Parsons, going after what a lot of people thought was the second best corner in the draft, and that's J.C. Horn.
And third, if you don't count an injured Caleb Farley, his injuries really brought him down draft boards. J.C. Horn, like Andrew said, the second best guy in the best corner by all accounts, Bass Surtain. I mean, we saw Surtain go against these LSU receivers and these high level SEC receivers. I mean, Horn's on the East on the SEC, but not as well. I mean, he's a good player. Some people say that he's going to help that pretty good Carolina defense that they're building upon. They're kind of quietly building a strong defense there. Not really so much of the offense, but the defense is coming along. I thought they should have gone Surtain or even Parsons, because Parsons is probably the best overall defender. But I'm happy for the Panthers that they didn't take Justin Fields here.
Didn't have to face Justin Fields twice a year for the next 10+ years, or at least for the next 5 seasons, you would assume, on his rookie deal.
But the whole J.C. Horn thing kind of created a domino effect throughout the rest of the draft. Really messed up a lot of people's draft plans because Dallas was supposed to take Surtain, but because that Carolina took Horn, the Broncos were able to take Surtain.
Another surprise with the Denver at 9. We thought that they might go quarterback, even with trading for Teddy Bridgewater. They've got Drew Lock, a younger quarterback. They end up passing on Justin Fields as well. Like you said, grabbing Patrick Surtain at 9. So kind of 2 questionable picks. We thought in the mock draft that Patrick Surtain was going to be the first guy off the board, but at number 10 to Dallas. But with the defensive player going at 8, defensive player going at 9, like you said, Dallas at 10 ends up trading back a couple of picks.
Yeah, Dallas didn't get their guys, so they said, why the hell do we keep this pick? Let's trade back, which makes sense because they really wanted Surtain, and the fact they didn't get him, and the Broncos really didn't need. I mean, their defense is decent. They didn't really need the help, but I guess they're taking best available.
Yeah, once again, just kind of both of these picks I put as questionable just because, one, taking Horn over Surtain for the Carolina at 8, and then at 9 with the Broncos also passing on a quarterback. So not saying, once again, that these guys won't help out the defense because they definitely upgrade both of these defenses, but just kind of questionable in regards of who was on the board, what positions they also need. That's why it makes it questionable. But like you mentioned at the very beginning of the show, Stein, Mel Kiper says the offensive players were taken with the first 7 picks of the draft. The first defender gone off the board at 8. That's the latest a defender has gone off the board in the common draft era, so that's since 1967.
Which is interesting because next year we could see a defender go first overall. That's what some people are saying. And
in the way too early 2022
one of my favorite players, cornerback Derek Stingley out of LSU. Also some other good defenders all around. But the thing is, I think this is kind of showing of the NFL, of today's NFL, how undervalued defense can be because everyone wants that flashy weapon receiver, that flashy quarterback, the flashy running. I mean, running back wasn't taken until later, but everyone's just focusing on the offensive side of the ball. And, I mean, people are seeing what the Chiefs did, what the Bucs did. I mean, yeah, the Bucs defense was great, but their offense with Brady and those weapons and the Chiefs, like that's kind of and even the Ravens, those guys are the classes of the NFL. So that's just what teams are trying to emulate. So we saw 2 other teams really trade up to take their offensive, to another level, or at least try to improve their offense, and that was the Eagles and the Bears. Both teams that had terrible offenses. Yeah,
they were both in the bottom 5, bottom 10 in the league in points per game. Both had very bad passing yards per game stats. So the Eagles trade with Dallas, a little interdivision trade, like 2 picks. I think they had the 12 pick and move up to number 10. They take Devontae Smith, the other wide receiver from Alabama. He was the last of the big 3 that was on the board. A big upgrade for the Eagles. They've been trying the past couple of drafts to get the wide receiver that they wanted. It just really hasn't worked out. The past 2 seasons, their leading wide receivers had less than 600 yards receiving. So it was definitely a big upgrade that they needed.
And they've been no-name guys. I mean, an aging Alshon Jeffrey is probably the most notable, but like, you don't want to be throwing to a former to Ward or
Travis Fulgham was
Greg
their leader
Ward,
last season, and he had like a 5-6 game stretch where he got like all of his receiving yards.
I mean, everyone loved Ertz, but Ertz's clock is pretty much done.
I think the biggest thing that hurt for the Eagles and the reason why they went wide receiver again is because they took Jalen Reagor last year, which a lot of people questioned, but then also Justin Jefferson was taken by the Vikings, the pick right after that.
Yeah.
And you saw the kind of season that Justin Jefferson had. He was almost the offensive rookie of the year.
He would have been a perfect Eagle. Like that just makes sense to see him go there. They take the SEC receiver, though. I'm glad they didn't take, Bateman or one of those Big 10 or Big 12 receivers because they've had bad success with Pac-12 receivers. So they're finally going to the SEC, dipping in that well, and taking a big-name guy, a guy who has a Heisman Trophy to his name, one of the only wide receivers in a while to win the Heisman Trophy. But the biggest knock on Devontae, and we talked about this last time, is his size. Now, we saw him make some amazing catches in college. that's going to be a little bit harder against some of the bigger body cornerbacks.
I don't see it as much of an issue because, like I said in our last show, Devontae Smith, like, he should have been playing on that weight his whole last season at Alabama when he won a Heisman Trophy at that weight. You've seen kind of a transition in terms of wide receivers that have been drafted, like the Tyreek Hills, even though he was a 5th-round draft pick, not a first-round draft pick, but kind of smaller guys that really use their speed. So
yeah, I mean, I don't think Devontae is as fast as Tyreek.
I
would classify him as like a slower Tyreek, but similar, body style and a little bit skinnier.
It's just all about protecting your body when you're going to get tackled. So just trying to prevent him going over the middle, and you got one of those big linebackers coming with a full head of steam. So just all about protecting your body after you catch the football and kind of go down instead of fighting for those extra couple of yards.
And then another team we talked about moving up was the Bears, who really kind of had a lot of things go their way early on with the draft to get the guy they wanted, and that is Justin Fields. We can kind of feel the excitement was building towards someone drafting Fields all night.
Yeah, that's what, after Denver didn't pick Fields at 9, we were
even Carolina not picking Fields.
Yeah, we were like, someone is going to trade up, whether it's Washington or Chicago. Someone's going to trade up and draft him. Otherwise, he's either going to go 14 to Minnesota or 15 to New England.
Or even 20 to Washington, but...
So they end up. It was kind of a desperation move for the Bears just because of everything that happened with Mitch Trubisky. A lot of people are saying it was a desperation move to try and find their franchise quarterback once again. They gave up their first rounder next year. They gave up, I think, a 5th rounder in this draft and a 4th rounder next draft, or vice versa.
Yeah, everyone's saying this is like when they traded up for Trubisky.
Yeah,
similar deal. But there wasn't the quarterback taken after Trubisky. The 2 quarterbacks were Deshaun and Mahomes. Whereas the quarterback taken after Justin Fields is Mac Jones. So I don't...
Yeah, that's what Trubisky was 29 and 21 as the Bears starter for the past 4 seasons.
Winning record, but dude was just...
He kind of saw the writing on the wall in the last season with getting benched to Nick Foles. The Bears just needed to change the scenery, like I said. It was just a kind of a desperation move for that Bears coaching staff, the Bears GM, and... Only time will tell to see whether or not this is a good pick. A lot of people...
Yeah, Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, trying to get their guy. I mean, he's kind of he is a franchise quarterback. You can build. He's going to wear number 1 like he did in college, and
I'd say that the biggest knock on it is just that Fields is going to Chicago, kind of a place like New York, where just you haven't seen that quarterback success in recent history. So it's like, well, Justin Fields is a great quarterback, but will he get hindered by going to the Bears with this pick? So I think this is a potential great pick for the Bears, but it's really got to work out for you because it's just going to be more hate if this ends up being a Mitchell Trubisky 2.0.
Oh, exactly. Moving on to another quarterback taken is Mac Jones falling to the Patriots at 15. Belichick drafts a quarterback in the first round. Let's see how this goes.
Yeah, that's what I put this once again as another possible great pick just because there was a lot of talks pre-draft about the Patriots going to have to move up to get their quarterback, whichever one they want to go after. They were able to stay at 15, not have to trade away any future picks, and they got probably the guy that they wanted the most in Mac Jones. They said Cam Newton is still going to be the starting quarterback to start out this season. I don't think that's going to last too long just because we said how Mac Jones is the most pro-ready guy. I imagine him taking over mid-season, maybe 3/4 of the way through the season at the latest. And I think that this is a great fit from Mac Jones' side of things, also being able to be coached by Bill Belichick.
Yeah, I would say think of that coaching pedigree. You come from being coached by Saban to Bill Belichick. Like,
that's not really a drop off. I guess that'd be kind of more of a straight line, a horizontal.
Those 2 of the best football minds in our lifetimes, if not ever. So those 2 guys really to help shape this young man's career. I do want to see Cam still succeed, and they also do still have Jared Stidham on the roster.
1 Alabama quarterback, 2 Auburn quarterbacks.
Yeah, so an interesting quarterback room, and then Damian Harris, running back, so an Alabama running back. So
just start building up which guys are from which SEC team.
Yeah, so I don't think Mac is going to be day 1. I don't even think he's going to be. I don't think he'll be the guy for a few weeks. I think,
like I said, I'd say mid-season to late season.
Yeah, I mean, Cam is an injury risk. I don't see him getting benched. I don't see Cam getting benched for play. I see him, the only reason he would get benched would be because he's injured.
I don't know. He could get benched. He got benched for play once or twice in garbage time, like towards the fourth quarter, just from not being effective. So I think Mac Jones will be the starter by the end of the season. Is how I'll put it. So, but I think that's a potential great pick for the Patriots at 15, not having to trade up and probably getting the quarterback
that they wanted. I mean, Fields probably would have been sexy too, but Mac's kind of like a trusty, like he's not the convertible, but he's like the trusty, like, SUV that'll get you there.
Exactly, Stein. Jumping down to the number 25 pick as the Jaguars once again were on the board. And he was reunited with Travis Etienne as they end up going with the second running back off the board.
And as the Najee, quickly, a little fantasy thing. Najee Harris to the Steelers, probably the second or first pick in a lot of people's keeper drafts. Mm-hmm. Definitely a day one starter in Harris, but also a great guy. I don't know if you saw the story about Harris throwing the draft party at the homeless shelter that he actually attended as a kid.
Yeah,
so that's pretty cool.
Great guy there. So, but the Jaguars drafting Etienne, kind of a questionable pick just because they had the undrafted free agent with James Robinson, who was a 1,000-yard rusher last season. Urban said that they're going to use Etienne as a third down back next season. I don't know why you would draft a guy at 25 overall if you're just going to use him as a third down situational guy.
There's a reason why Jacksonville was picking first in this draft, and that's because they went 1-15. Now, football, we know, is a team game. One guy does not make a difference. Yes, a quarterback will help, and an elite quarterback like Lawrence will definitely help. But they have a lot, and I mean a lot, of other problems on this team, defense specifically. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they take Etienne kind of as like a pet pick, to appease your new guy. I mean, yeah, Lawrence and Etienne are buddies, and, Etienne is also another high character, great guy, great college career. I just think this was not the move to be made in this situation, and especially because the Jags had the first pick in the second round, and I think they probably could have gotten a defender, a better guy at this point, and then even traded back to get Etienne in the second round.
Yeah, that's what. So yeah. In a lot of the projections, they had Etienne going as the first pick in the second round to the Bengals. I think they were worried about the Bills at 30. That was really the only other team that needed running back help. So I guess they were worried that the Bills might take him 30th overall and he wouldn't be available. But still, overall, I just don't see Etienne not being more of a part of this offense because, like I said, you just don't spend a back-end first-round pick on a guy that's going to be out there in just certain situations.
I mean, yeah, the Harris makes sense as a pick. The Steelers have other holes, especially on the offensive line, but Harris makes sense because they have 0 running backs on their roster. The fact that they have Robinson on their roster, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I hate to say this because I like Etienne, but I'm also going to predict that Etienne is going to be, one of those running backs that kind of just fizzles out pretty quickly. One of those guys who gets lost in the shuffle. He also did sign Carlos Hyde, too. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think he still has a little bit left in the tank.
I wouldn't say that he'd fizzle out, but I'd say he'd maybe have a slower start to his career than other guys just because of how full their running back room is right now. Carlos Hyde's on a 1-year deal, so he'll be gone next season. James Robinson, there's got to be a reason why he was an undrafted guy. I mean, yes, he was very impressive with being the 1,000-yard rusher this past season, but can he keep that up consistently throughout his career?
I also think that maybe Etienne hit his peak in Clemson. Maybe that could be a case too. Some guys peak in college and really go down after. But I mean, I hope the best for him. But I'm just weary about this pick.
Like you said, I think the more questionable part about it was that they were more trying to please Trevor, so that's why they ended up going with this at 25.
Yeah.
Apparently, they really wanted Kadarius Toney at the 25 pick. He ends up going 20th overall to the Giants. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But they really liked Toney and were upset that they weren't able to get him.
We had a bunch. Speaking of the combination of Trevor and Etienne, we had a bunch of I guess. What would you call them? Reunions of players, of quarterbacks and receivers and running backs. Joe Burrow, we already talked about him and Jamar getting combined. Tua and Jalen Waddle on the Dolphins. Devontae and Jalen on the Eagles.
Yeah, when
and
Hurts
then,
obviously back in his Alabama
here's one you didn't
days.
think about. Felipe Franks and Kyle Pitts for the Falcons.
I was thinking more guys that were actually
I know.
drafted day one.
I mean, yeah, Pitts will be a day one guy, but I don't think about Felipe Franks.
Yeah, Felipe was signed to the Falcons as an undrafted free agent.
Guys getting back together, and that's always fun on when they're like, let's get it and stuff like that. We had also a couple other guys going from a lot of LSU guys going to the Bengals. Besides Jamar, you saw that big defensive tackle. I forgot his name. He
must have been a day 2 or day
he was a
3
later
guy.
pick, but yeah, they're calling the Bengals the LSU North.
I mean, they are the same cat kind of. So
I mean, they call the LSU the Bayou Bengals for a reason.
But a couple of quick draft facts before we go into looking some of the greater picks from the first round that we haven't talked about yet. There were 8 quarterbacks drafted through the first 3 rounds, which was the most in the common draft era. You kind of talked about the changing with how they want the flashy offenses. And then it was also the first time ever that at least 5 wide receivers were taken in each of the first 3 rounds. So just once again, 2 kind of very offensive heavy draft.
Such a deep offensive draft. Receivers especially, which is different because last year, was not a great receiving. I mean, Justin Jefferson, was the best, but he was later. He was a later first round pick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was in the 20s.
Also funny enough, I know you brought up this fact on like a few days after, but the draft second most viewership. It was in Cleveland. They put on a good show. We saw the commissioner in his comfy chair.
Wasn't a fan of the chair. I thought that was kind of stupid.
I thought that was stupid too. I thought they were kind of forcing that. Like the NFL is like, oh, people think this is funny. Let's keep it. No, it's stupid. Also, I heard the draft will be in Vegas next year. I think that's the plan. So we will see the boats. Hopefully we'll see the boats.
Keep our fingers
because
crossed
I think
on
they
that
want to
one.
have the draft so they can host the Super Bowl or something like that. I think that's what you have to do.
Gotcha.
But it had more viewership than the Oscars. I mean, there wasn't a lot of movies this year, so who really watched the Oscars? I mean,
the second largest viewership to the 2020 draft, obviously with the COVID year, a lot of people watching that draft.
Yeah.
For that was for the first round, and then it was the third most watched overall draft, 2020, and then it barely 2019 had barely more viewership than.
I hate to say this, but I kind of do miss the day when it was just in a giant theater and like everyone was sitting in those tables in the back room. Now it's like everyone has their own freaking room at the draft, and
I think that it also kind of contributed with COVID, trying to keep everyone separated.
That's true,
too.
but it becomes such a spectacle. Like, compare this draft to the MLB draft, which is in literally like a studio in like New Jersey, where
especially this past year's MLB draft, there's only 5 rounds instead of the usual like 4.
And they just say a guy and then they say the next team's on the clock. It's so quickly.
It's fast paced when you got to get through 40 rounds.
That's true. That's true. So let's talk about some of the picks that we thought were great picks.
Yeah, we mentioned some of them during the draft recap, but these are some guys that I want to go in depth on that we hadn't mentioned yet. The first one, number 13 overall pick with the Chargers, taking Rashawn Slater, offensive tackle out of Northwestern. And the reason, Stein, why I put this as a great pick was because this is a guy that was thought of as a top 10 talent. We mentioned with the Bengals needing to protect Burrow, the Chargers need to protect their young quarterback in Justin Herbert. They signed Corey Linsley and Matt Filer in free agency, and then they get the second best offensive lineman. Some people viewed him even better than Penei Sewell.
Yeah, they say, Sewell's definitely more of a pure tackle, where Slater's kind of a guy who can play maybe inside if he needs to.
Yeah, they're talking about the option of playing him inside. But I thought this was a great pick for the Chargers. One, because they get a top 10 talent outside of the top 10, and then also they didn't have to trade up to make this pick.
Yeah, I mean, Northwestern, too, got to be a smart kid as well. So a great pick there. And they could have used a flashy weapon for their quarterback, but they're investing in Herbert to protect Herbert. Which
they fixed 3/5 of their offensive line just in this offseason.
Yeah, and they didn't even have a bad offensive line last year. It's not like Herbert was like one of the most sacked guys. So
he wasn't. I think they said he was one of the most pressured quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean he's more mobile, but he wasn't like up there with Joe and Matt Ryan and in terms of running for his damn life. Colts take Kwity Paye out of Michigan, falls to him. And the Colts was a team that we really didn't think had a lot of areas of need, honestly.
Yeah, that's why I put this once again as a great pick because edge was one of their biggest position of needs.
And they got the best available guy that they could have.
That's what this is. This is one guy that I actually had picked correctly from the mock draft. He was my top-ranked edge rusher. Ends up being second off the board as the Dolphins with their second first-rounder.
Take Jalen
Phillips,
which is also a great story. I don't know if you've read his story too.
Yeah, how he medically retired from football. Well, both of these are great stories. Phillips
and then Kwity Paye from the African heritage.
Yeah, exactly. So they didn't have to trade up. Once again, didn't have to trade up to get probably one of their number one needs. And I just thought that it was a great pick, great positional pick, and it just once again solidifies the great defense that the Colts have. Yeah.
Vikings, a team that we thought maybe could go and go quarterback, take Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech. Just a big guy that they gonna have to use to replace the guys that they lost in Khalil. So.
Yeah, that's what the Vikings apparently were gonna take Justin Fields if Chicago didn't trade up to number 11. The Vikings had the 14th overall pick. They trade back to 23, trade with the Jets, and they end up getting Darrisaw, helping that offensive line. They lost Riley Reif in free agency.
Yeah, lost Khalil to retirement, I'm pretty sure.
And then that's what, with the picks that they got from the Jets, they end up drafting Kellen Mond and Wyatt Davis. So two great picks, or two great draft picks that they got from the picks that they acquired. So just overall getting three solid guys and being able to trade back.
Mond's a guy who's definitely not going to play, but will be sitting on the bench. And Wyatt Davis, a guy that they can also add to that offensive line to help, block for Dalvin. I mean, when it's all said and done, the Vikings are going to be Dalvin City, next year.
Exactly. Some of the day two steals, just kind of honorable mentions, mainly guys that were projected first-round guys, ended up dropping to day two.
Christian Barmore from Alabama goes to the Pats. Big defensive tackle. By all recounts, the best defensive tackle available. You said that's like the Vince Wilfork.
It's literally going to be the next Vince Wilfork for them.
Yeah. I mean, he's not as big.
I was going to say, not as big of a gut as Wilfork had, but still a great pick for them in day two.
Tevin Jenkins to the Bears to help protect, their new addition at Fields. Bears haven't had offensive line woes, really, so.
Yeah, I thought it was a great pick. Once again, I had Tevin Jenkins going in the late teens, early 20s, so the Bears end up trading up to get Jenkins at 39 overall. I thought that was a nice pickup for them and able to block for the new quarterback.
Another guy who had first round grades was I forgot to pronounce his
Trevon Merrick.
Trevon Merrick. I can't pronounce his last name. I'm saying Morig. Goes to the Raiders, who actually just released one of their safeties.
I would say Merrick was the Raiders' one good pick in the draft.
Yeah, we'll talk about them when we get to some of the bad picks. So the Raiders have never shied away from picking who they want, and it doesn't matter where they are in the draft because they will pick the guy that they want.
Yeah, they go to the beat of their own drum, however that saying goes.
Azeez Ojulari out of Georgia falls to the Giants at 50. Some people were saying he was the third best edge rusher, or edge/linebacker, that new hybrid position. And then I'm not even going to try to pronounce him. We're just going to call him JOK.
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah goes 52 to the Browns.
A guy who got first-round grades all around, falls to the Browns to help their defense.
Yeah,
gave him an A+ for a lot of draft grades.
Yeah, that's what they said. He had a heart issue, and that was the reason why he ended up dropping on a lot of teams' boards. The doctors and medical staff ended up clearing him, said that it shouldn't be much of an issue, but that was the reason why he slid down to 52. But if everything goes right health-wise, then that's a great pick day two because he was probably one of the best linebackers besides Michael Parsons.
Also out of Notre Dame, too. Doesn't have to go far to Cleveland.
Then Ronnie I put one guy for round 3, Ronnie Perkins, 96 overall to the Patriots. Patriots did a great job days 2 and 3 with getting two solid guys that could have been drafted a lot later. So
I do also like Creed Humphrey. So him joining the Chiefs.
Yeah,
I know he was first round. I know he was a first round guy. I think no, he wasn't the first round pick. He was in the second round. I do like Creed Humphrey as well, kind of a captain of that Oklahoma offensive line, joins the Chiefs, who are kind of rebuilding their offensive line too.
Yeah, they made some nice additions in the offseason, just signing Joe Thuney,
and then they just acquire Orlando Brown from the Ravens, so kind of helping their offensive line.
Yeah, so let's move on to some questionable picks now from the draft.
Yes,
We talk about some of the great
reaches,
ones.
some of the reaches that people were saying, and these are these are all like first round reaches and like maybe second round reaches. We're not going to talk about third round reaches because those are a lot harder to project.
Yeah, all the big three guys that we'll talk about are all first round draft picks. And we mentioned this team already. The Raiders at 17 overall, taking Alex Leatherwood, offensive tackle out of Alabama. He was the 60th. I can't talk anymore. 60th ranked prospect out of ESPN from ESPN. And once again, I mean, if you flip Merrick and Leatherwood, then it seems like, oh, that's okay. But we talked about the Raiders' history just with Mayock and Gruden, some of the questionable first-round picks they made. Damon Arnett last season.
Out of Ohio State.
Yeah, Cleveland Farrell, or however you say his first name.
Cleveland Farrell from Clemson. Really, I mean, these guys haven't been notable, but they haven't been like terrible either,
Yeah, that's what I mean. The past 3 years, they've drafted guys.
Safety Colton Miller.
Yeah, that have been much later in terms of the prospect rankings than they should have been drafted. So just the Raiders, we talked about, they will take the guys that they want, but just kind of a questionable move for their first round draft pick. The Giants at 20th overall, I thought that they did a great job moving back in the draft, going to the 20th overall pick, trading back, getting some assets, but they needed edge help, and this was right around where all the edge guys were starting to go off the board.
Kwity Paye was there too.
Yeah, he was literally
picked one after.
Got picked. Yeah, the next pick after. They ended up going with Kadarius Toney.
Russo and Robinson were also there too. So, yeah, Kadarius out of Florida, been defined as a gadget guy. Through and through.
Yeah, slot receiver. Once again, kind of that new style of the smaller, faster wide receivers. Like I said, I thought it was a great move to trade back, but with the addition of Kenny Golladay, I talked about in our mock draft episode, I didn't think that they should go receiver round one. They ended up thinking that they needed to get Daniel Jones some more help.
Yeah, this is kind of the pick where it's like, all right, you have Saquon, you have Kenny Golladay. Now we're going to give you Kadarius Toney, who's going to play that slot, gadget guy. He's probably going to be the returner too as well. Mm-hmm. You have all these weapons. Evan Ingram too is a good weapon. So let's see what you can do.
Yeah, I just thought it was kind of questionable. They should have gone edge instead of the wide receiver, but still a decent pickup. And then the last guy that we'll talk about is at the 28th overall pick with the Saints, Peyton Turner, the edge out of Houston. He was the 73rd ranked prospect according to ESPN. Yes. And this is just more that the Saints had bigger positional needs at cornerback and wide receiver.
Yeah, needed somebody to complement Thomas and Sanders, even with him leaving. And the cornerback, really don't have the second cornerback next to Lattimore, so they just went with the guy I think they probably had on their board, and just said screw it, they don't care. The Davenport experiment is still going on for the Saints, who a lot of Saints fans are saying needs to stop, and I think this might be like a little fire for that Davenport chair, Yeah,
exactly. So just questionable in terms of they had bigger positional needs, end up going with a guy that was more projected as a second-round draft pick.
Yeah, some day 2 questionable picks. We saw the Texans, who had their first pick at 67, which is just so sad. A team that is just in such dire straits, and their first pick is in the 3rd round.
Yeah, and they end up going with Davis Mills, the quarterback out of Stanford, a local guy to
a Georgia guy. And then Divine Diablo going to the Raiders, another one of their...
Yeah, we'll end up talking about the Texans and Raiders later with some of the teams with the worst overall draft, so we'll talk more about them in a little bit.
And then Trey Sermon, a guy who lit it up in that semifinal game last year from Ohio State.
Yeah, I just thought it was questionable him going to the 49ers. You mentioned how they're just very heavy on the run game. They've got so many bodies in that running back room. When you talk about Mostert, Jeff Wilson, JaMychal Hasty they drafted last year. I think they signed a veteran guy as well, and I think they drafted another running back later on in one of the.
I mean, you lose
picks.
Kevin Coleman, but this. I guess they're just trying their traditional 49ers thing of starting 4 running backs.
Yeah, so I didn't think the pick was bad. I thought just
the timing.
Yeah, more the team, not as much where he ended up getting drafted.
Yeah,
so.
I thought he definitely slipped a little bit. I thought he might have been the third or fourth best. I mean, those UNC guys really shot up boards because they were, a 1-2 punch combo.
Yeah. Let's move on to
Yeah.
the teams that ended up having the best overall draft, in our opinion. We'll highlight 3 teams in particular. Got a couple of honorable mentions as well.
Yep.
And the first team is kind of no surprise just because they had 2 first-round draft picks, 2 second-round draft picks. So when you have higher picks, you end up getting more quality guys. And as you would expect, that's the Miami Dolphins. 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. Thank you, Texans, for that, like you just mentioned. The 2 highlights in the first round were getting Jalen Waddle and Jalen Phillips. Added a couple of nice guys in the second round with Javon Holland, the safety out of Oregon, and then Liam Eichenberg, the offensive lineman from Notre Dame, and Hunter Long adding the tight end from Boston College in the third round. So I thought all of those were very quality picks for the Dolphins. Really the only downside to their draft is they didn't get a running back. Javonte Williams, the running back out of North Carolina, went 35 overall to the Broncos.
Yeah.
And then the Dolphins had the 36th overall pick, so you wonder if they would have gone running back if he was available there. But still, just an overall great draft in terms of having very quality picks and, in my opinion, not messing them up.
I like Eichenberg, Notre Dame offensive lineman. You can't go wrong there. Hunter Long going to combine with Mike Gesicki for that, that Browns 1-2 punch that everyone wants with their tight ends. So looking good. They're setting up. Waddle finally got that weapon to combine with some of their other guys. So we're going to see the Dolphins really have an improvement and probably challenge to be a wild card. I don't think they're going to pass the Bills, but I think they're going to challenge for wild cards.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there, Stein.
Speaking of teams that were wild cards, the Browns.
Yeah, the Browns had a very good draft. We talked a little bit about them earlier. Greg Newsome with the 26th overall pick was a very solid pick for them, the cornerback. They've just really rebuilt their secondary, and you could say the defense as a whole when you look at them getting Owusu-Koramoah in the second round. They've made some great additions, getting a couple of guys from the secondary from the Rams.
Yep.
They add Jadeveon Clowney as well. So just a lot of big names on this defense next season. We knew they had a great offense, but really being able to rebuild that defense.
2 years in a row, the Browns have drafted great. So we're really seeing this is like we're living in the twilight zone.
Exactly.
Anthony Schwartz, a good receiver out of Auburn to help maybe take over if OBJ is not going to be playing with them or if he's going to be, God knows what's wrong with him.
Yeah, he'll probably be the deep threat for them next year. He's got just crazy speed.
Yeah,
so.
And then Kamara was a steal. Get Richard LeCounte out of Georgia, and then Marvin Wilson. We'll talk about that when we get to our undrafted free agent portion. Another great team that had a great draft was the Patriots. A lot of picks this time. They get Mac Jones, Christian Barmore. We already talked about Perkins. Also get running back Ramondre Stevenson out of Oklahoma.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of comparisons to LeGarrette Blount. You know how good he was with the Patriots a couple years ago. So I just like all the picks that the Patriots made. Didn't have to trade up for Mac Jones. Made some great picks on day 2. Getting Barmore and Perkins, guys that I thought slid on the board. And then, like I said, you get a guy with the same body type as someone that had success in their backfield. You know how much the Patriots love all the different running backs that they have.
Yeah, exactly. Either, Michelle's days might be over in New England. That's what I've been hearing.
He's on the final year of his rookie deal, so he'll probably be out the door next season.
And then honorable mentions, Bears had a good draft. Chargers with the offensive line help. And I even say the Falcons probably would be up there. The Falcons just got kind of all areas of need. Let's flip the script though. Let's go to the teams that had bad drafts, and we've already kind of mentioned them.
We pretty much mentioned all the teams already. We'll start off with a very obvious pick in the Texans, and half of it's just the Texans being the Texans. The other half is just they didn't have a pick until round 3, so you're kind of set up for failure.
You're not going to have a good draft. But the fact that they lose J.J. Watt and their rush defense was 27th last year in points per game. They take in their first 3 picks 3 offensive players.
Yeah, so we talked about Davis Mills, which I thought was kind of questionable since they signed Tyrod Taylor. I mean, you don't know what's going on with Deshaun, so I think that's one of the reasons they did it. They also traded for a backup quarterback this offseason. So just, I mean, if Deshaun stays, you got 4 quarterbacks right now on the roster.
And then they take Nico Collins out of Michigan.
I thought that was a decent pick just because they lose Will Fuller, so he's already going to contribute, probably get starting reps at the start of next season.
Yeah.
And then go tight end with Brevin Jordan in round 5. So, like you mentioned, the first 3 picks, they go all offense. And then with their last 2 picks, they go with a linebacker and a D tackle. But you mentioned how bad they were on defense last season, and they don't fix that need.
Yeah.
When you're already behind the 8 ball, not picking until the 3rd round, you got to address those needs right away. And I thought they kind of missed the ball on that.
They're just set up for failure next year, and it's gonna be awesome watching them go down. Raiders, like we said, the Raiders probably always get bad draft grades.
Yeah, it's just because Gruden and Mayock don't go away from the script of the norms of looking at guys that most people think are good, and they end up going with who they think are going to end up being good. So
I love this fact. They had drafted 3 safeties.
Yeah, so Diablo or whatever.
Divine Diablo, yeah.
So he was a safety back in college, but they ended up listing him as a linebacker. So it sounds like they're going to switch him to weak side linebacker position. But they drafted 3 safeties. Malcolm Kuntz was a DN that they reached on that pick as well. We mentioned Leatherwood with their first round draft pick. Merrick was really the only guy.
Merrick's their best pick. Yeah,
the only guy that I really liked from their draft. So just another back end in terms of the draft grade for the Raiders.
Yeah. And then the Saints, had needs, but we talked about Turner. They passed on that the USC guy. What was it? Verituck? No, not Verituck. What's ASJ? Asante Samuel Jr.
Yeah,
I was about to say Austin Safarian Jenkins again.
And they passed on Asante Samuel for a cornerback help. They passed on Elijah Moore for the wide receiver help.
Yeah.
And then also talking about Ojulari and JOK. So just a lot of guys that they ended up passing on. Some people like Pete Warner, the linebacker out of Ohio State. Compared to his prospect ranking, I think it was kind of a reach. They passed on Chaz Surratt, who ended up going later on to the Vikings.
Yeah.
And they ended up not drafting a corner, which was one of their biggest needs, until the 3rd round. And then they drafted a wide receiver in the 7th round.
Yeah, a guy on the 7th round will barely make the roster if he does.
Yeah, so just a couple of reaches, not getting positions that they needed for the Saints, so not a great overall draft for them, which I'm sure you are happy to see.
No, I was. I'm glad that somehow Fields didn't fall to them. And then honorable mentions, but these 2 guys didn't have picks till later, the Seahawks and the Rams.
Yeah, once again, they didn't have picks until the 2nd round, so like I said, when you don't have a first-round draft pick, it's kind of hard to get a good draft grade unless you end up getting some steals in the later rounds.
I do like the speedy guy out of Louisville that the
Tutu Atwell.
Yeah, Tutu Atwell, the Rams were able to get. But that's probably my favorite pick with them. We have now, after the draft, it's always the scramble to get all these unsigned free agents. So I kind of went through the list of unsigned free agents and kind of picked out some of the, I guess, most notable names.
Some of the names that you've recognized.
Some of the names that we recognize, and just guys that I think have a good chance of making their rosters. Bengals take running back Puka Williams out of Kansas.
Puka Williams,
a guy who transferred. Love that name. But with Mixon, being an injury question, I think Williams has a good chance of making the roster.
They did release Giovanni Bernard, so he does have a chance to be the running back too there.
Browns take Marvin Wilson, a guy who was on draft boards. So
he was supposed, if he didn't come back to Florida State this past season, he was being projected a round 1 draft pick in 2020. So he ends up losing a lot of his draft value. Was still supposed to be a day 3 guy. Apparently he got one of the bigger bonuses for an undrafted free agent. Is what I heard, but once again, the Browns needing defensive help. I thought that was a nice signing for them.
Jags had some two really good signings. Dylan Moses, a guy who was literally a top 10 pick. Some people were saying it just his injury with his knee from Alabama.
But there goes your dream of him going to the Ravens.
I did think he was going to go to the Ravens. I'm surprised the Ravens didn't call him up. Also take cornerback DJ Daniel out of Georgia. We saw Georgia's, even though we don't like Georgia, had a really good defense last year. Mm-hmm. Daniel was a part of that. Titans take Torrey Carter, a fullback One of the only. Some people thought he was going to get drafted.
Block for Derrick Henry. I'll take
Torrey
that.
Carter. He's one of the classic, head down fullbacks.
One of the few teams that still use a fullback in the NFL.
Also to pick up Miller Forrestall to replace their loss of the tight end last year.
Jonnu.
Yeah, Jonnu going to the Pats. Forrestall, kind of a name from Bama. Chiefs take the old Texas quarterback Shane Buechele, who transferred to SMU. He was another guy who was listed as a late draft pick, but he drops out. They also pick up Malik Herring. Georgia fans will know him as the big defensive end. Giants take tight end Nick Eubanks, a guy who was also projected to be drafted.
Very, very weak tight end class, especially after Kyle Pitts this year.
Yeah. Pat Freemouth was also drafted by the Steelers. But I think Eubanks was honestly a top 5 prospect for tight ends, but that just shows how weak the tight end class was.
Yeah, it should be a good signing for the Giants then.
Eagles pick up Jamie Newman, who I have listed Wake/Georgia, honestly.
Didn't play a game for Georgia, but did transfer to Georgia.
Also, the Eagles take Trayvon Grimes, who was a former 5-star prospect receiver. So, just showing how a 5-star, nothing's guaranteed in the NFL. Washington football team, this is probably one of my favorite signings, even though he will be competing with Boobie Gibson, is Jared Patterson, who had more yards than Travis Etienne last year and also 19 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, he had that big game for Buffalo last year where he had 400 yards or something like that, 8 touchdowns.
Yeah, so this guy is going to be hopefully will make that roster and be a monster for them. Definitely a week 8 fantasy guy if you're looking, if he's there, if he's starting or if he's playing. Bears take offensive lineman Gage Cervenka out of Clemson. He was the captain of Clemson's offensive line. Good pedigree from there. A big guy.
It just sounds like a very Bears offensive lineman, Gage Cervenka. It just sounds like a guy that's on the Bears
Speaking of guys with funny names, Vikings take one of our favorite guys, linebacker Tuff Borland out of Ohio State. We saw him in the 2 playoff games that they were in.
Once again, I feel like a guy named Tuff Borland should be on the Vikings. He just seems like he would be.
Hopefully
a Viking.
He doesn't wear any sleeves or anything when he plays. He just needs to show how tough he is. And then the Seahawks take a Florida State player into Tamorrion Terry.
Once again, another guy that kind of got hurt from coming back. He wouldn't have been a round 1 guy, but definitely day 2, maybe day 3 guy.
He's a deep threat, right?
He does a little bit of everything. He was Florida State's
he
was Florida State's only good receiver. So
also, quick shout out to some of the Tech guys taken. Jalen Camp to the Jags was selected. Also, Presley Harvin was selected, the punter, to the Steelers, and then David Curry was unsigned free agent to the Broncos, a linebacker. So quick shout out to my Tech guys, but yeah, I just wanted to get those out there. Do you have any? You had a lot of Florida State had a lot of good drafts.
Florida State had maybe 5. Well, we mentioned the 2 undrafted guys. They had,
but you had Asante Samuel, Kendo.
Yeah, Kendo, Robinson, and I feel like there's one other guy that I'm forgetting that got drafted.
Oh, Landon Dickerson, technically.
Yeah, went in round 2 to the Eagles. Was a Florida State guy before transferring to Alabama.
So let's talk about the Falcons for the last part of the show, Roach. Let's talk about every pick the Falcons make. The first pick, Kyle Pitts. Best guy available. Some people say he's the best athlete in the draft.
Yeah, definitely the best non-quarterback. I'd say probably the number 2 guy behind Trevor Lawrence. And I think with them drafting Kyle Pitts instead of a quarterback just shows that they're still trying to compete now. They're not trying to rebuild for the future. So overall, you can't complain about the pick as a Falcons fan. Just gives them another weapon on offense. You have maybe Julio. You'll have Calvin Ridley. Just a great couple of weapons for Matt Ryan to go after.
Yeah.
Just mismatches all over the place for defenses.
You combine him, especially because the Hurst will be playing here, even though they didn't pick up his next year option.
Yeah, he'll be on the team.
He'll be on the team next year, but they didn't pick up his following season.
Option,
yeah, excuse me.
For 2022.
So he will be playing. So you have a good 1-2 punch with him. We saw Luke Stalker last year and Graham, and it's like this is a vast improvement. Even if he's playing more of a receiver role, I don't mind. Really,
Yeah, he's gonna line up all over the place. They talked about how the crazy wingspan that he's got, and just you saw the 4.4 type speed.
This helps the Falcons' red zone so much. Also, like you said, it shows that they're not willing to start the formal rebuild. Taking second was Richie Grant. Now, this was an interesting pick because Morig and Ojolari were still on the board, who a lot of people thought the Falcons would potentially take.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised they didn't end up going with Merrick. The safety was definitely like one of the biggest needs that they had on the defense, besides edge rusher, probably just because they had like no one back there.
Yeah.
I think they signed 2 veterans during the offseason, but both guys on 1-year deals, kind of aging guys.
Harmon, these guys are just kind of fillers. Placeholders. These are when the Braves, got those guys in like 2014.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that it was good that they went with the positional need and getting Richie Grant. I guess there was something about him that they liked more.
The biggest knock on Grant is his undersized, but he has a great football IQ. And UCF is kind of becoming a little bit of a football factory.
They've had decent teams the past couple of seasons, so he has had success in college. So I thought overall it was still a great pick for the Falcons.
Now, one of the sneakiest picks I think the Falcons make is their third pick with Jalen Mayfield, a very young guy, 20 years old.
Yeah, this is a guy that when I made my first mock draft about a month before the draft, he was I think he went 31 overall to the Chiefs in my draft before they traded their pick. So he ended up falling closer to draft day, falls in the 3rd round to the Falcons, but they have him listed as an offensive tackle, but he could slide into...
short arms, that knock that everyone was saying.
He could slide into a left guard spot, especially because that's a position that the Falcons is kind of an open job for next season, so he'll compete for that left guard spot, and you may see him starting there as a rookie.
Yeah, I really like this pick. I think that the Falcons are trying to build an offensive line with as many prospects as they can get. This is probably one of the most raw prospects, but he had a good career in Michigan, and there's some highlights of him making some big pancakes. 4th pick, and a lot of people saying this is probably the biggest reach of the draft for the Falcons, was Darren Hall out of San Diego State, and the biggest knock on him is his size.
Yeah, really, when you talk about these 4th and 5th round picks for the Falcons, the biggest thing that I saw for most of them, besides getting a center for the offensive line, was just trying to get depth positions for the defense. So when you talk about Hall, you talk about Graham, the D tackle out of Texas, Ogundeji, I guess is how you pronounce his last name, the edge from Notre Dame, and then you talk about the other corner, Williams from Boise State.
Williams has been penciled, though, as one of the best. He was the best returner in college football last year, and I'm sure when Patterson is gone after next year, he'll take over as that kind of, I'm sure Patterson will return kicks, but Avery Williams can return punts.
Yeah, but I thought with all those picks, it was just a great job for the Falcons of getting depth. Even when you talk about the other 4th round pick with Dahlman, the center out of Stanford.
Dahlman I think might have been a steal a little bit.
He's got center and guard experience. So once again, if you're not confident in Matt Hennessy, he can take some snaps there at center.
Yeah.
Could also compete for that open left guard position. But just all these picks for the Falcons, we talked about how they just needed to build through the draft and just get positional needs. I thought the Falcons did a great job of doing that. Maybe drafting an edge. They drafted one in round 5. If they would have drafted one a little bit sooner, probably would have been nice. But besides that, just being able to get some of these cheaper rookies on contracts and just fill up some of those depth positions that they really needed.
I mean, this is a whole new regime, so hopefully, and a lot of people liked all the picks. Grades were Falcons got pretty good grades across the board.
I saw anywhere from a B- to an A. You might have some of those outliers of a couple of A+, a couple like C+ or Cs.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it seems like the Falcons every single year finish anywhere from like a B- to a B+.
And the biggest knock, though, probably on this whole Falcons draft was the lack of a running back taken.
Yeah, that was another big surprise as well. They signed the undrafted free agent Javian Hawkins out of Louisville. They signed another running back as an undrafted free agent.
I forgot where,
Yeah, I don't remember where he's from. You mentioned about Felipe Franks, and then
Yes.
the safety, one of your favorite names, Dwayne Johnson Jr.
Who's not related to Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I had to look that up.
A safety out of San Diego State. But like I said, I think overall the Falcons did a good job, especially fixing up that defense.
Yes.
You mentioned just not getting a running back, and I thought not getting an edge rusher soon enough were really the biggest knocks on their draft.
Falcons Falcons actually had the most unsigned free agents of anyone in the NFL.
It makes sense because early in the offseason, they had like 30 guys for it was 52-man roster, I think it is, for the NFL. They had like 30 guys under contract, so it made sense, like I said, trying to get these guys and stay under the salary cap, because right now money is very tight for the Falcons. I don't even know if they can afford to sign all these draftees. That's why they're mentioning Julio talks could save up some money in cap space. But they got to do something. So we'll see how Fontenot and the rest of the Falcons fix out that staff. But overall, I'd say it was a very positive draft for the Falcons.
I concur.
So, guys, that's going to do it for our episode number 7. Thank you guys once again for tuning in. If you want any updates on when shows are being released or anything like that, follow us on Instagram at the Couch Quarterbacks. We should be posting again in the next couple of weeks. We'll kind of start to get away from the NFL draft, start looking forward to next season, Stein, as hopefully it'll come around sooner than it looks like it'll be on the calendar.
Yes.
But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for episode number 7. Thank you guys for tuning in once again, and we will see you guys on the flip side.
See you guys.